So it's becoming more and more clear, to be honest, by the day, that this is probably going to end up in a no deal situation. I think that's very highly likely. I do not think a deal will be reached, even though we've just extended the transition period by, I think, another year. So we'd now be technically extended to, I think, 2020, I think. Yeah, this doesn't end well at all, and the biggest problem is because there's a split in Parliament. There are idiots in there who campaign to remain, but because their constituency voted leave, they are now saying that they would now see economic harm than go against that vote and do what's right for their country rather than pursue party lines. And that's just not in the Tory party, that's in the Labour Party. Dan Jarvis is one such person who dodges this question on a daily basis. So, this comes from the New Statesman, and this is, I think, this is exactly what's going to happen, because it sets out a no-deal scenario, and it basically says the only way you will convince these Tory Brexiteers that they are wrong is to basically go, you can't survive the fall from this cliff. So, it's by Stephen Bush, and it goes, it may take going over the cliff to convince Tory Brexiteers that they can't survive the fall. So, none of the possible permutations for how to resolve the backstop can satisfy all the players. What is there to say at this point? And I completely agree with him. The Brexit talks are stalled, with little prospect of change on either side. The issue at hand is the backstop. None of the possible permutations to how to resolve the question can satisfy all the following: the Irish government, the Conservative Party, the DUP, and the Westminster Parliament. The backstop is in essence an insurance policy for Ireland, that come what may, even should trade talks between the United Kingdom and the European Union collapse or stall for a long period, as trade talks are prone to do so, that there will be no change to arrangements on the border between the island and Northern Ireland while the withdrawal agreement is settled and qualified by majority voting. The final trade agreement between the UK and the EU is subject to a veto from all member states, including Ireland. So any backstop arrangement has to provide that the assurance to the Irish government, which is why a backstop is a built-in time limit, is nothing. Oh dear, sorry, I'm recovering from a cold and it's all gone in my chest. Which is why a backstop with an inbuilt time limit is nothing doing. For the DUP, however, any arrangement which creates greater barriers between Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom that exists between the Northern Ireland and Ireland is an existential threat to their central political project. So the backstop must cover the whole of the United Kingdom if it is to pass without being the confidence and supply agreement between the DUP and the Conservatives to an abrupt end. So any backstop has to cover both Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom to satisfy the DUP. And this is where it starts to get complicated. But some Conservative MPs, including several in the Cabinet, fear that a backstop without a time limit would last forever. So the only backstop that can pass through the Conservative Party is a time-limited one, which is unacceptable to the Irish government. So the deadlock continues. So what could break the deadlock? There's a crucial difference between the three groups of the two of the players, the DUP and the Irish government. They have a mandate to suffer economic damage, and the Conservative Party very much doesn't. In theory, in a negotiation where one party has more to lose than the others, that party blinks. The problem is that there are enough people within the Conservative Party who think they can survive a head-on collision. that it may take going over the cliff to convince that they cannot survive the fall. And that's essentially where we are in this. I suppose what you would call it is a blind man's bluff. You have a situation, as was laid out there, where Ireland doesn't want anything to change on this border. You have the DUP, who have insisted that any proposal must not change their situation with the United Kingdom, and that they must cover the whole of the United Kingdom as well. They don't want anything to change. So you have a hilarious problem where the answer is quite obvious to solve this problem, and that's to do what many Leave voters and many Leave campaigners did campaign for, was let's become like Norway. Let's stay in the single market. Let's stay in the customs union. That solves all these problems. You know, and that does technically fulfill many of the promises that many of the Leave campaigners actually made. Why? Because the Leave campaign ran such a vague campaign, it doesn't really matter what outcome they have. It doesn't matter that Leave means leave, because you can find so many of the Leave campaigners, people campaigning for Leave, saying that becoming like Norway was an acceptable situation. So that's the hilarious situation where we are now in, and it's a political deadlock, but it's also a political deadlock in Parliament as well, because at this time you could almost say that the two big parties in Parliament have been essentially split in two. Now, the fun thing is that there is a massive majority to remain in the single market and in the customs union. Now, what needs to happen is that the Labour Remainers and the Tory Remainers need to come together and just say, we know this is going to be economically damaging to our country, we are not going to let this happen, so sod party loyalty, we are going to do what's in the interest of this country and remain in the single market and remain in the customs union. We're going to go for the Norway option, that's the option we're going to push, or we're just going to say, this is a terrible idea, we're just going to go for remaining. And that's what's going to happen. This entire Leave project is basically going to show the United Kingdom that we always had the best deal possible. And that was being a member of the European Union and having all of its benefits. And that's essentially what it's going to prove. You still have idiots running around saying that the EU is not going to exist. And the thing is, though, guys, you were saying that 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, you were also saying that 5 years ago, the EU wouldn't exist. And then you can just keep on going back and back and back to all these guys saying, this EU project won't exist in 5 years. What? So 2016, 17, 18, we're 3 years in, the EU still exists, 19, 20, so by 2020, if the EU still exists, which it will, because every single person in Europe can see the benefits of being, you know, linked together in an economic union and political union, because that's where it's going to end up. Like, I don't make any secret about that. That's probably where it's going to end up. And it will be good because Europe will become a big power player. You know, that's essentially what's going to happen. And we're going to be left on the edges of it. And we'll be poorer for it. You know, this whole idea of, oh, we're being bullied, when we were in the European Union where we could affect what they did and, you know, make rule changes like we could do because we were one of the main players in Europe. Now we're out of it, we'll just be left by the wayside. Countries don't want to do deals with us. They aren't interested. They're more interested in doing deals with the EU because it's a bigger market. There are more customers in that market. So, I'm sorry, but all you guys have done exactly what, who voted for this, have done incredible economic harm to this country. And I've said it before, but enjoy these good times while they're lasting. Because come leave time, you know, it's all going to go downhill. So I've said it, enjoy the good times while they last. Because they're not going to last too much longer.